Faster. I'm not paying you to stand around. A billionaire CEO's voice echoed through a luxury mansion, cold, sharp, and full of anger. But he had no idea that the woman he was shouting at was the most important person in his entire life. A helpless elderly maid stood silently, taking every insult, every command, every humiliation without saying a word. But behind her tired eyes was a secret, a painful secret she had carried for decades. And across the same mansion, that CEO lived a life of power, success, and control. But inside, he was completely empty. No family, no love, no past he could remember. Just pain, buried deep inside his success. But fate was silently working, because the woman he disrespected every day was not just a maid. She was his mother. Yes, his real mother. The same woman who once held him as a baby. The same woman who once gave up everything for him. Now worked under him, cleaning his floors, silently suffering, while he treated her like nothing. And the worst part? Neither of them knew the truth. Not yet. Until one stormy night, everything changed. A sudden accident. A broken silence. A hidden pendant. And a truth so shocking, it shattered everything. The moment the doctor saw the pendant, his face went pale. "Sir, this woman might be your mother." Silence. The world stopped. The CEO laughed in disbelief, but deep inside, his heart started shaking. Because something felt familiar. Something he had ignored his whole life suddenly became real. And when the truth finally came out, when he looked into her eyes again, everything broke. Years of pain, regret, and silence all came crashing down in one moment. "I lost my son," she cried. And then he whispered, "Am I your son?" What happens when a powerful billionaire realizes the woman he insulted every day is his real mother? What happens when guilt becomes too heavy to carry? And what happens when love finally returns after being lost for years? Stay with this story till the end, because what happens next will break your heart and heal it at the same time. This is not just a story. This is Midnight Stories. Crescent Moon Broken Heart. Welcome to Midnight Stories, where every secret has a dark truth, and every emotion has a hidden pain. Broken Heart Crescent Moon. Tonight, you will hear a story that will break your heart and heal it at the same time. So stay with us, because nothing is ever what it seems in Midnight Stories. Faster. I'm not paying you to stand around. The voice echoed through the luxury mansion like thunder. In a second, everything went silent. Servants froze. Hands stopped moving. Even the air felt heavy. At the top of the grand staircase stood Ethan Walker. Young, powerful, ruthless. Dressed in a sharp designer suit, Ethan looked every bit like a billionaire CEO. His cold eyes scanned the room, and just one glance from him was enough to make people nervous. Slowly, he began walking down the marble stairs. Each step echoed, loud and controlled. At the bottom of the hall, an elderly maid struggled to keep up with her work. Her name was Grace. Her hands trembled as she pushed the mop forward. Her back was slightly bent with age, and her breathing was heavy, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. "Sir, I'm trying," Grace said softly. Ethan stopped. His expression turned even colder. "Trying," he repeated sharply. "Trying isn't good enough." Grace immediately lowered her head. "Yes, sir." Ethan walked closer, his eyes scanning the floor carefully. Everything had to be perfect. That was his rule. That was his world. Then he saw it. A small streak on the marble floor. Almost invisible, but not to him. His jaw tightened. "What is this?" he snapped, pointing at the spot. Grace quickly dropped to her knees and wiped it with her cloth. "I'm sorry. I'll fix it right away." Her hands shook as she rushed. But Ethan didn't move. "I don't pay people to apologize," he said coldly. "I pay them to do things right the first time." The other workers stood silently in the background. No one dared to speak. Because everyone knew, when Ethan Walker was angry, nothing could stop him. He turned away in frustration. "This house runs on discipline," he said firmly. "Not excuses." To Ethan, life was simple. No mistakes. No weakness. No emotions. He walked toward the massive glass window overlooking the city. From the outside, he had everything. Money, power, respect. But inside, there was nothing. No family. No love. No past. He had grown up in an orphanage. Abandoned. Alone. That pain didn't break him. It made him cold. Behind him, Grace slowly stood up, holding onto the wall for support. Her breathing was heavy, but she didn't complain. She simply continued working. Quietly. Silently. As if she had spent her entire life learning how to endure pain without making a sound. A younger maid whispered to her, "You should rest. You don't look well." Grace gave a weak smile. "If I stop, I might lose this job." Her voice was soft, but filled with fear. Because she needed this job. More than anyone could understand. Slowly, Grace looked up, and her eyes landed on Ethan. For a moment, she froze. There was something about him. Something strange. Something familiar. Her heart tightened, as if it was trying to remember something long forgotten. But she quickly looked away. "It's nothing," she whispered to herself. How could a man like him ever be connected to someone like her? It was impossible. Across the room, Ethan's phone buzzed. A business call. He answered instantly. "Yes," he said coldly. "Talk to me." Just like that. He moved on, as if nothing had happened, as if she didn't exist. But fate had already begun its work. Because the woman he just humiliated was not just a maid. She was the biggest truth of his life. And very soon, everything was about to change. Ethan Walker wasn't born into wealth. He wasn't raised in comfort. And he definitely didn't grow up surrounded by love. Long before he became one of the most powerful CEOs in the country, he was just a forgotten child in a crowded orphanage. No one knew where he came from. No one knew who his parents were. All they knew was that he had been left at the gates one cold night, wrapped in a thin blanket, crying until his voice gave out. He was given a name, a bed, and nothing else. No memories, no family, no one to hold his hand when he was scared. As a child, Ethan used to sit by the small window in the orphanage dormitory, watching other kids get picked by families. Every time the door opened, his heart would race. Maybe this time, he would whisper to himself. But it was never his turn. Days turned into months. Months turned into years. And slowly, hope turned into silence. He stopped running to the door. Stopped smiling. Stopped expecting anything from anyone. Because deep inside, he had accepted one painful truth. He was alone. Completely alone. The world didn't owe him anything. And if he wanted something, he would have to take it himself. That's where everything changed. Ethan became different from the other kids. While they played, he worked. While they dreamed, he planned. He studied harder than anyone else. He took every small opportunity seriously. Cleaning, organizing, helping. He did everything, not out of kindness, but out of survival. Because he knew no one was coming to save him. Years later, when he finally left the orphanage, he carried nothing with him except determination. No money. No support. Just a burning desire to never feel that helpless again. He worked multiple jobs. Barely slept. Skipped meals. Faced rejection after rejection. But he never stopped. Because every time life pushed him down, he remembered that small boy sitting by the window, waiting for someone who never came. And that memory made him stronger. Colder. Ruthless. Eventually, his hard work paid off. Step by step, he built his empire. A small opportunity turned into a business. That business turned into success. And success turned into power. Now, Ethan Walker was a name everyone respected. A man people admired. A man people feared. But no one truly knew him. Because behind all that success, there was still that same empty space. A place where a family should have been. A place that money could never fill. Meanwhile, under the same roof, another story of pain quietly existed. The elderly maid, Grace. Unlike Ethan, she remembered everything. Every moment. Every tear. Every regret. Years ago, she had a child. A baby boy. Her world. Her everything. But life had not been kind to her. She was poor. Alone. Struggling just to survive. There were days she couldn't even afford food. Not for herself, and not for her baby. She tried everything. Worked long hours. Skipped meals. Sacrificed everything she could. But it was never enough. And then came the day that broke her completely. The day she had to make the hardest decision of her life. With tears streaming down her face, she held her baby close for what felt like the last time. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You deserve a better life. One I can't give you." Her heart screamed not to do it. Every part of her wanted to run back home and hold him forever. But she knew the truth. If she kept him, he would suffer. So, with trembling hands, she left her baby at the entrance of an orphanage. Hoping, praying, that someone kind would find him. That someone would give him the life she couldn't. She didn't wait to see who took him. She couldn't. Because if she looked back, she knew she would never be able to walk away. That day didn't just take her child. It took a part of her soul. From that moment on, she was never the same. Years passed. But the pain never faded. Not even a little. Every single day she thought about him. Wondered where he was. Wondered if he was safe. If he was happy. If he was alive. She carried that guilt with her everywhere. Like a shadow that never left. The only thing she had left was a small pendant. Inside it was a tiny picture of her baby. And a name she had given him with love. Ethan. That name was her only connection to him. Her only hope. And even after all these years, she never stopped believing. Maybe one day, she would whisper to herself, maybe I'll see him again. But life doesn't always give second chances. Or at least, that's what she believed. Until fate brought her to this mansion. To this job. To this place. Where every day, she unknowingly walked past her own son. Worked under him. Listened to his voice. Felt something she couldn't explain. A strange connection. A pull in her heart. But she never understood why. And Ethan, he felt nothing. Because how could he? How could a man who spent his entire life believing he was abandoned ever imagine that the person he was hurting was the one who once gave up everything for him? Two lives. Two painful pasts. Connected by one truth. A truth neither of them knew yet. But not for long. Because very soon, the past they both tried to bury was about to come back. And when it did, it would change everything. The storm arrived without warning. Dark clouds covered the sky, and within minutes, heavy rain began crashing against the glass windows of the mansion. Thunder roared, shaking the walls, while flashes of lightning lit up the rooms in brief, blinding bursts. Inside, the atmosphere was just as tense. Ethan Walker stood in his office, pacing back and forth, his phone pressed tightly against his ear. "This deal cannot fail," he snapped. "Do you understand how much is at stake?" His voice was sharp, filled with frustration. On the other end, someone tried to explain, but Ethan wasn't listening. "I don't want excuses," he cut in coldly. "Fix it. Tonight." He ended the call abruptly and threw his phone onto the desk. His jaw was clenched. His breathing heavy. Another problem. Another failure. Another reminder that no matter how powerful he became, things were never fully under control. He ran a hand through his hair and stared out at the storm. For a moment, something felt off. Like the world outside was trying to mirror something inside him. But before he could think further, a loud crash echoed from downstairs. Glass shattering. Something falling. Ethan froze. Then immediately, he rushed out of his office. "What was that?" he shouted as he moved quickly down the hallway. Servants gathered near the kitchen, panic visible on their faces. No one answered. Ethan pushed through the small crowd, and then he saw it. Grace, lying on the floor, unconscious, a tray of broken glass scattered around her. For a second, everything went silent. The same woman he had yelled at earlier, now completely still. His first reaction should have been anger. Another mistake. Another problem. But this time, it wasn't. Something inside him shifted. A feeling he wasn't used to. Concern. Call a doctor. Now. Ethan shouted. His voice echoed louder than before, but this time it wasn't filled with anger. It was urgent. Real. 2 servants quickly rushed to make the call. Ethan stepped closer, looking down at her. Her face was pale. Her breathing weak. For a brief moment he hesitated, then slowly knelt beside her. "Hey, can you hear me?" he said, his voice lower now. No response. Rain continued pounding against the windows. Thunder roared again. Minutes later, the doctor arrived. He quickly examined her, checking her pulse, her breathing. "She's weak," the doctor said. "Looks like exhaustion. Maybe she hasn't been taking care of herself." Ethan looked away, slightly uncomfortable. For some reason, those words didn't sit well with him. The doctor gently lifted her arm, then noticed something around her neck. A small, old pendant. Worn out, but carefully preserved. "What's this?" the doctor murmured. He opened it. Inside was a tiny, faded photo. A baby. And next to it, a name scratched into the metal. Ethan. The doctor froze. His eyes slowly lifted toward Ethan. Then back to the pendant. Then again at Ethan. "Sir," he said carefully. Ethan frowned. "What?" The doctor hesitated for a moment. "I need to ask you something." Ethan's expression grew serious. "Just say it. Were you raised in an orphanage?" The question hit him unexpectedly. Ethan narrowed his eyes. "Yes," he replied slowly. "Why?" The room suddenly felt smaller, quieter. He noticed the way the doctor was looking at him. Something wasn't right. The doctor took a deep breath. "This may sound strange, but I think you should see this." He handed the pendant to Ethan. Ethan took it, confused. He opened it. The moment his eyes fell on the photo, something inside him stopped. A baby, wrapped in a blanket, small, fragile, and underneath it, his name, Ethan. His fingers tightened around the pendant. "This," his voice dropped. "Where did she get this?" The doctor spoke carefully. "I think this belongs to her child." Ethan looked at him sharply. "What are you saying?" The doctor didn't look away this time. "I'm saying she might be your mother." Silence. Complete silence. The storm outside continued, but inside, everything froze. Ethan felt like the ground beneath him had disappeared. "That's impossible," he said immediately. His voice was firm, but not steady. "It can't be." But deep inside, something didn't feel impossible. It felt real. Too real. His mind raced. Memories, questions, doubts, all crashing together at once. He looked at Grace. The same woman he had insulted. The same woman he treated like nothing. Now lying helpless in front of him. His grip on the pendant tightened. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice lower now. The doctor shook his head slightly. "I can't say for certain, but the name, the situation, it's too much to ignore." Ethan didn't respond. He couldn't, because for the first time in years, he didn't have control. He didn't have answers. He slowly looked back at her face, at the lines of pain, the quiet strength, the exhaustion. And suddenly, that strange feeling from before returned. That unexplainable connection. That familiarity. His heart started beating faster. "No," he whispered to himself. But the thought wouldn't go away. What if it was true? What if the person he had been searching for his entire life was right here? And not just that. What if she had been here all along, working under him, suffering in silence, while he treated her like nothing. The weight of that thought hit him hard. For the first time in years, Ethan Walker felt something break inside him. Not anger, not frustration, but something deeper, something human. Guilt, regret, fear. He slowly sat down beside her, still holding the pendant. His voice barely came out. "Who are you?" he whispered. Outside, the storm began to calm. But inside the mansion, a much bigger storm had just begun. Because the truth was no longer hidden. And very soon, everything Ethan believed about his life was about to change forever. The storm had passed. The rain slowed to a soft drizzle, and the dark clouds began to fade away. A quiet calm settled over the mansion, but inside one room, everything had changed. Grace slowly opened her eyes. The light above her felt too bright at first. Her vision blurred, then slowly cleared. She tried to move, but her body felt weak. "Easy. Don't try to get up." The voice was different. Soft. Careful. She turned her head slightly, and froze. Ethan Walker was sitting beside her. Not standing tall with authority. Not shouting. Not cold. He was sitting, quietly, watching her. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. "Sir," she whispered weakly. Ethan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked at her, differently, as if he was seeing her for the first time. Then slowly, he lifted his hand, and showed her something. The pendant. Her pendant. Her eyes widened instantly. "My pendant," she said, trying to reach for it. Her hands trembled. Ethan gently placed it in her palm, but didn't let go completely. "Where did you get this?" he asked softly. His voice was calm, but there was something deeper inside it. Something heavy. Grace held the pendant tightly, as if it was the most precious thing in the world. "I've had it for many years," she said, her voice shaking. Ethan swallowed. "Why?" he asked. There was a pause. A long, painful pause. Then Grace closed her eyes, and tears slowly began to slip down her cheeks. "Because it's all I have left of my son." The words hit Ethan like a wave. His grip on the pendant tightened slightly. "Your son," he repeated quietly. Grace nodded, struggling to speak through her emotions. "I lost him many years ago." Her voice broke. "I had nothing, no money, no support. I couldn't even feed him properly." Her breathing became uneven as memories flooded back. "But I loved him," she whispered. "More than anything." Tears rolled down her face. Ethan didn't interrupt. He couldn't. He just listened. For the first time in his life, he listened. "I didn't want to leave him," she continued, her voice trembling. "But I had no choice." Her hands tightened around the pendant. "I left him at an orphanage, hoping, praying, someone would give him a better life." Ethan's heart started pounding. Every word felt like a piece of his own past. "I never saw him again," she said. Silence filled the room. Only the sound of her quiet crying remained. Ethan's throat felt dry. "And his name?" he asked slowly. Grace opened her eyes, looking at the pendant. Her lips trembled. "I named him Ethan." Everything stopped. The world. The room. Time itself. Ethan felt like he couldn't breathe. His chest tightened. His hands shook. He looked at her. Really looked at her. At her eyes. Her face. Her pain. And suddenly, everything made sense. The connection. The feeling. The familiarity. It wasn't random. It wasn't imagination. It was real. His voice cracked as he spoke. "Say that again." Grace looked at him, confused. "My son's name was Ethan," she repeated softly. That was it. The final piece. Ethan felt something inside him completely break. Years of emptiness. Years of pain. Years of questions. All crashing down at once. His eyes filled with tears. Something he hadn't allowed in years. He slowly dropped to his knees beside her bed. His voice shook. "Am I?" He struggled to speak. "Am I your son?" Grace froze. Her breath caught. Her eyes widened as she stared at him. "What?" she whispered. Ethan held up the pendant, his hands trembling. "I was left at an orphanage," he said. "I never knew my parents. I only had a name." His voice broke completely. "Ethan." Grace's hands flew to her mouth. Her body trembled uncontrollably. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. But her heart already knew. She looked at him again. Not as a CEO. Not as her employer. But as something else. Something deeper. "My son," she whispered. Tears streamed down her face. Ethan nodded slowly, unable to hold back his emotions anymore. "Yes," he said. "It's me." That was the moment. Years of separation. Gone in a second. Grace let out a broken cry as she reached for him. Ethan leaned forward, and they embraced tightly. As if they were afraid to let go. As if letting go would take this moment away. She held his face in her hands, looking at him through tears. "My son, my Ethan," she repeated again and again. Ethan closed his eyes, holding on to her like a child who had finally found his home. "I thought I lost you forever," she cried. "I thought you didn't want me," Ethan whispered painfully. Grace shook her head immediately. "No, never. I loved you. I always loved you." Her words shattered something inside him. All those years, all that pain, all that loneliness. It wasn't abandonment. It was sacrifice. Ethan pulled back slightly, guilt washing over him. "I yelled at you," he said, his voice filled with regret. "I treated you like nothing." His eyes dropped. "I didn't know." Grace gently lifted his face. "No, you didn't know," she said softly. Her touch was warm, comforting, the kind of warmth he had never felt before. "There's nothing to forgive," she added. But Ethan shook his head. "No, there is." His voice was firm now. "But I promise you, from today, everything changes." He stood up slowly, helping her sit comfortably. "You're not a maid anymore," he said. Grace looked at him, confused. "You're my mother." His voice carried strength, but this time it wasn't cold. It was filled with emotion, with respect, with love. Tears filled Grace's eyes again, but this time, they were not just of pain. They were of peace. After years of loss, after years of waiting, she had finally found her son. And Ethan, the powerful, untouchable CEO, had finally found something money could never buy. A family. And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel empty anymore. He felt complete. Red heart,